My Gymsuit by Paula Danziger, Chapter 8. The previous chapter ended with this sentence. 2 weeks later, we came into class and found a substitute. We figured that Ms. Finney must be sick or taking a mental health day to recuperate from teaching us. The substitute made us diagram sentences on the blackboard. Halfway through the period, Mr. Stone walked into the class, stood in front of us, cleared his throat, and said, "Miss Finney will probably not be returning to this school. Mrs. Richards will be here until we find a new full-time English teacher. Now, get back to work." "Get back to work," he said. "How could we do that?" Alice Carson raised her hand and asked, "Mr. Stone, is Ms. Finney all right? Is she sick or in an accident? What happened?" Mr. Stone looked at us. "Miss Finney will no longer be teaching in my school. I want all of you to forget everything she taught you." The room was very still for a minute. Then Joel stood up and said, "Miss Finney taught me the proper methods of punctuation. Should I forget that?" Mr. Stone got even madder. Turning to Joel and glaring, he said, "Joel Anderson, you're a troublemaker. Detention for the rest of the month." Before I even realized what I was doing, I stood up and said, "Miss Finney is the best teacher in the whole dumb school, and I want her back again." Mr. Stone looked shocked. "Marcy Lewis, this isn't like you at all. Now sit down and keep quiet." I was sick of hearing that. First my father and now Mr. Stone. So I kept standing there and said, You have not converted a man because you have silenced him." That was a quotation that Miss Finney had us write about. The whole class applauded. Mr. Stone said, "You all have detention. And Marcy, this is not like you. Your mother is president of the PTA. She will be very upset when she hears about this." The bell rang. He told us to go to our next class. We didn't move. "I said, go to your next class. You will be very sorry. I will put this on your school records." He stormed out of the room, and we heard him screaming at some kid who was at his locker at an unassigned time. We still hadn't moved. Some of the kids started to cry. I did. My whole world seemed upside down. Joel finally spoke. "Come on, let's go. We're not helping ourselves or Miss Finney. Let's find out what's happened." Everyone got up to leave. Joel came over to me and said, "Marcy, you were great. You really told that fool off. I'll see you in detention, and we'll figure out what we're going to do." Then he left. I didn't believe it. Joel spoke to me and said that he liked what I did. Nancy stood there and said, "You really did it. I'm glad." We had to run to the gym. Nancy didn't want to be late. I didn't care. When we got to gym, I went up to the gym teacher and told her that I had been mugged on the way to school by a syndicate specializing in stolen gym suits. Then I sat down and watched another thrilling volleyball game. The day went quickly. I called up my mother and told her that I was staying after to do something extra with my English class. I didn't mention that the something extra was detention. That would have been tranquilizer territory. She was pleased and said, "Marcy, I'm so glad that you're getting involved in school activities." After the last class, Nancy and I rushed to the bathroom. She combed her hair and I checked for pimples. Then we headed for detention. Joel was standing by the door. He smiled when he saw us and said, "We better hurry up. They give added time if we're late." So the three of us sat down in the back. Nancy whispered, "What do you think is happening?" Joel said, "I don't know, but my dad is on the Board of Education. I'll try to find out." I whispered, "It must be something awful. They usually let teachers at least finish out the year." "Maybe she starred in a naughty film and Mr. Stone saw it." That was Nancy's idea. The detention teacher kept looking at us. Joel told us that we had to quiet down or else we would have to stay later. He and Nancy had had detentions before. This was all new to me. I sat there and pretended to read. Usually it's easy for me to read, But this time I was so upset that I couldn't do anything. The teacher finally told us that time was up and we could go. Everyone rushed out of the room. Marcy, I'm going to ask my father what's happening. I'll let you know as soon as I find out. Then you can call Nancy and she can let some other kids know. Okay, please find out. Joel, do you think it's really bad? I'm scared. Joel shrugged and shook his head. I don't know. And then he walked away. Nancy and I headed home. Hey, Marcy, what are we going to do if she can't come back? What happens to English class and to Smedley? They won't let us have Smedley without a teacher. I could feel the tears coming down my face. I couldn't say anything. Nancy stopped and grabbed my hand. Don't cry. It'll be all right. She thought for a minute. I take that back. Ms. Finley says it's good to show emotions. Marcy, go ahead. Cry if it makes you feel better. That's why it was all so important to me. The kids from Smedley and Miss Finley and Ms. Finney still cared about me, even if I showed my feelings. I felt as if someone had taken a vacuum cleaner and cleaned all my insides out and left me with only my blimp outside. Marcy, I think Joel likes you. He said he was going to call you tonight, not me, and he's been talking to you a lot lately. I guess Nancy told me because she thought it would make me feel better, but it didn't. I'm looking ahead. That's the end of chapter 8.